the Hawes staff. She was a teacher, a caring teacher, a kind teacher, and a loving teacher. And today we have gathered to remember Shirley's memory and the impact she made on this entire school community. She touched the lives of parents, she touched the lives of teachers, she touched the lives of administrators, but most importantly, she touched the lives of students and children. Today we gather to dedicate an important part of the school to the memory of Mrs. Kolkebeck. This new garden is being dedicated in Mrs. Kolkebeck's memory so that her legacy will live on forever in this courtyard. It is well known in the Hawes community that when the idea of this garden was first proposed, it was Mrs. Kolkebeck who immediately offered her Teachers of the Year monies to assist in this garden's development. Without Mrs. Kolkebeck's generosity, there may never have been such a beautiful garden in the school. And that is a metaphor, is the perfect word for Shirley Kolkebeck as a teacher and as a human being. Beautiful. The flowers that bloom here and the flowers that will bloom across Ridgewood and beyond will be symbolic of the love Mrs. Kolkebeck shared with her students. When people see the flowers and they notice their beauty, may they always think of Mrs. Kolkebeck. I am singularly honored to have the opportunity today to speak here and to have had the opportunity also to speak prior of Mrs. Kolkebeck. And it's quite an honor because I respected and looked up to her in so many ways. Mrs. Kolkebeck welcomed me with open arms into Hawes Elementary School. We talked, we laughed, she was honest with me. When I made a mistake, she would help me. She would also tell me that I made a mistake. And when I came up with a good idea, she sometimes would even call me brilliant. And I can't think of that word without remembering Shirley. And if Shirley used that word even jokingly about me, I think the word fits her more appropriately, because something that is brilliant, is bright, and shining, and distinctive, words that reflect Shirley Kolkebeck, again, as a teacher, as a parent, as a grandparent, as a friend, and most of all, as a human being. Hawes hasn't been the same place without Mrs. Kolkebeck. There's a certain emptiness that can't be filled. We walk by her classroom, and we expect to hear her voice or her wonderful laugh. We never had a chance to say goodbye. But one of the beautiful things about this garden is the fact that Shirley's memory can live on here forever. We can come here and remember her, and we never have to say goodbye. Many people have gathered here today to be part of this special ceremony, and I must state that there would be many more, but we had to limit the participation due to the space concerns here in the courtyard. And I would like to introduce a few of the special people who have come here today. We have Mrs. Kleiman and Mrs. Santoro, our HSA co-presidents. They are here to represent the moms of the Hawes community and, of course, the Home and School Association. We have Mr. Pendergast, the Dad's Night co-chair. And he is here to represent all the fathers and, of course, Dad's Night. Mrs. Regina Botsford is our Assistant Superintendent of Schools. She has come to Hawes to represent the district leadership. And we have many retired teachers and administrators. Ms. Kathy Rogers-Sachs have come back, which speaks volumes of how the impact of Mrs. Kolkebeck had on people is eternal and everlasting. I'm also so pleased that Jack Kopchik, Mrs. Kolkebeck's twin brother, is here. It's also my honor to introduce Mrs. Helen and Mr. John Kopchik, Shirley's parents. And a special happy birthday to Mr. Kopchik. Today he turns 89 years old. It's also my honor to introduce the rest of Shirley's family, her dear husband, Ken, her sons and their wives, Keith and Jessica Kolkebeck, and Scott and Ann Kolkebeck, and 5 very special people, Shirley's grandchildren, Tim, Owen, Jack, Selden, and Anjali. Grandchildren, be proud of your Mimi. She was very special, a person who loved and cared and shared and always helped others. As the principal of Hawes Elementary School, I was honored to work with Mrs. Kolkebeck for almost 5 full years. They were great years, and they were years that I will treasure. And today we're going to hear from a number of people who will share their thoughts and their memories of a wonderful person, Shirley Kolkebeck. And it gives me great pleasure to introduce our Assistant Superintendent of Schools, Mrs. Regina Botsford.
Thank you. It's beautiful to see you all here this afternoon to honor Shirley. I hope you don't mind if I read my comments. I think of Shirley as always being so full of life and so full of care for her students and for her teaching. I remember in particular her questions and her comments during those 2 years of the math PD meetings. Teachers, you remember that when they were, and you remember that they sometimes were a little challenging. Shirley was always ready and looking for better ways to do things. Not easier, but better. And she was always smiling and celebrating her teaching and the teaching of others. Her energy, her good humor, and her dedication helped us to get through the many challenges that come with teaching and change. When the day is tough, as it sometimes is in teaching and in life, I think of Shirley and her energy and her spirit. She continues to inspire me and to lift me up, and I hope the same for all of us. Hawes was indeed a better school for having had Shirley here, and the district was a better place for the children and for the adults for having had Shirley here too. Shirley leaves a legacy of caring, great spirit and energy, and dedication. One that those of us who were fortunate enough to know her will never forget. One that inspires us, and one that we will all do well to emulate. Thank you.
At this time, I would like to introduce some Hawes teachers who are special colleagues and dear friends of Mrs. Kolkebeck. Mrs. Stares and Mrs. Caruso have a special presentation, followed by Mrs. Rhoda and Ms. Acosta.
The staff has chosen a book entitled Reach for the Stars and Other Little Lessons for a Happier World. Bees taught me that cooperating
Bees taught me that cooperating with each other gets the job done. Flowers taught me that everything needs water to survive. Swans taught me that sometimes growing up can be difficult. My dog taught me that there's no one quite as special as your best friend. Cats taught me that lying in a sunny spot is a wonderful feeling. Snowflakes taught me that no two people are exactly the same. Clouds taught me that beauty comes in all shapes and sizes. The inchworm taught me to never, ever give up. Snowman taught me that sometimes things you love go away. Pigs taught me that getting dirty is okay. Giraffes taught me to reach for the sky. Turtles taught me that it is important to protect myself sometimes. The owl taught me to appreciate the moon and the stars. Bears taught me that snuggling up for the night invites sweet dreams. Now, Ken, we wanted to present you with this book, and hopefully you can read it to your grandchildren, as we know Shirley loved to do.
So,
The Hawes staff has decided that we would like to share a little part of Shirley with the children and have it for them to keep forever and ever. So the students will receive a packet of forget-me-not seeds after seeing this lovely, lovely afternoon ceremony. And for Ken, the Kolkebeck family and friends, we made you your own little pot of flowers to take home so that you can plant them and join with us in remembering Shirley.
tomorrow morning on the Hawes Morning News, they're going to show segments of today's ceremony so all the children in the school can remember this. There's a beautiful plaque over here that dedicates the garden to Shirley's memory. That plaque came to us courtesy of the Home and School Association. And all of the seed packets, every child will get a seed packet tomorrow to bring home to plant in their homes and hopefully even further away than just Ridgewood, so that, as we said earlier, the beauty of Shirley can bloom all over. And those seed packets were given to the school and the children through the generous donations of Dad's Night. Miss Patty Polisi was very special to Mrs. Kolkebeck, and I would like to invite her up at this time.
A teacher, a friend, a role model. These are the words that come to my mind when I think of Shirley Kolkebeck. Shirley was always a very important person in my life. She taught me many teaching skills over the years and always pushed me to work hard and never give up on my dreams. She supported me, guided me, and helped me to become the person I am today. There was not a day that went by where Shirley did not stop me in the hall or ask me how I was to see how I was doing. She gave me advice, listened to my stories, and taught me lessons that I will forever cherish. I always looked forward to our conversations, the laughter, and the time we spent together. While I miss those moments, I still have the memories. She was family. She was my Hawes mom. Here's a poem that I wrote about our friend, Shirley Kolkebeck. A subtle breeze, bringing a sweet scented bliss, so to be kissed with the sun's rays, traveling into that room filled with a loving, caring being, educating her students. With her guiding light of knowledge, so well spoken, always giving, and never asking anything in return. As a mentor, a true friend with a helping hand. Her path so pleasantly lived when looked upon. Seeing rows and rows of colorful flowers growing, showing a truly kind-hearted soul. When a thought of her comes to one's mind, a smile from fond memories you will find. Such a joy to have known her, this all will concur. Shirley will always have a special place in my heart, and I only hope that as a teacher, I could do for my students what she did for me. Thank you.
Now it gives me very special privilege and an honor to introduce Mr. Ken Kolkebeck.
Let's go up.
Yep.
All right. Wow, I don't know what to say. Thank you, Dr. Sevendinger, who I call Paul now because we've become good friends. Thank you, Ms. Botsford, Deborah, Georgianne, Patty, Debbie, Sylvia, Jill. Man, these guys were there, you know, in the first days after Shirley passed away. And they too have all become good friends. I appreciate the fact that you all are here today. It's been 4 months since Shirley left us, and her death has obviously left a void in many of our lives. It can only be filled with the memories of her life, some of which we've heard of today. And I must confess that I've not stood before a group like this or talked about her before an audience like this until today. So I ask you forgiveness if I falter over my words, because this is going to be a little tough. Patty, I really feel for you. You did a great job. You really did. Shirley didn't come to education by the normal path. Her initial education was in retailing, and for several years she worked in that field, including a few in Macy's executive training program. Some of you know we were in the Macy's Thanksgiving Day Parade, Shirley and I together. But when children came along, she felt Keith and Scott were more important, so she decided to be a stay-at-home mom. I was on the corporate track, and we moved to Pittsburgh, where she discovered a service in our new church called Mother's Day Out, where you could drop your children off for an hour or just a few, and so that mom could get some me time, and everyone appreciates that. On our return to New Jersey, and with the help of her non-teacher friend, Mary Thompson. Mary, put up your hand. Mary's here today. They recreated Mother's Day Out as Parents' Day Out, a child care program at our local church that is open to the whole Harrington Park and its surrounding communities, and still goes on to this day. It's still a thriving program and an outreach. The advantage of this, of course, was that she could do something of value, and all you know that Shirley didn't like to sit in one place for too long, and at the same time give something back to the community, and yet still be with our boys. When the boys started attending school full-time, she decided that PDO, as it became known, was not enough of a challenge. And so she decided that she liked working with children, and she started taking courses in education at St. Thomas Aquinas at night to fill the holes in her college courses. Shortly after starting classes, she also took a full-time job as an aide in the Alpine schools, where she worked for 2 years. Then 2 years as an instructor at the newly formed Alpine Learning Group, which we drove by on the way in here today, serving children with autism. So in 1991, she had reached the point where all that was left was her student teaching, and that was what brought her to Ridgewood and the Somerville School. Graduating in the spring of '92, the rest, as they say, is history, and she began teaching here at Hawes in the fall under Sharon Piety Jacobs. From the beginning, what she loved about Hawes was the collaborative spirit of the staff, and she would always tell me how helpful her co-teachers were and how much of their experience they wanted to share with this 40-year-old newbie. She loved Hawes, she loved her colleagues, and most of all, she loved the children. And she didn't give up pursuing her own education, continuing on to get her master's and then courses beyond her master's until all that was left was a PhD. In addition to courses at night, there were courses every summer. Much of this she did with Mary Thompson, who took the same path and has now taught in Pearl River for better than 20 years. Shirley's philosophy was that if I stop or take a break, I'll never get to where I want to be, and so she kept going. But it didn't end there. We must have every book that Lucy Calkins ever wrote. Not to mention every other educational guru under the sun. I'm sure that if you wanted to know about any teaching method or practice, you could ask Shirley and she would know about it inside out. But Shirley's method wasn't to follow any one practice or guru. It was to blend the best of each together. For she would always tell me, children don't all learn the same way. I need to use whatever method works and breaks through for each and every child. Pardon me. Sometimes, as a husband, as sons and daughters-in-law, as parents, we think we know everything there is to know about the person we're so close to. I am here to say to you today that we didn't. And while over the almost 40 years that Shirley and I were married, I had heard hours and hours of stories about Hawes, they were just that, stories. Anecdotes from work that were in black and white and two-dimensional at best. However, all that changed in the days that followed her passing. And at the funeral home, with people queuing out the door, our friend Bill Keith, who's also here today, Bill, you want to raise your hand? Longtime teacher at Riverdale High School said to me, Ken, they don't do this for everyone. When it looked like I didn't understand what he said, and I probably didn't, I was pretty much in shock then, he said it again, Ken, they don't do this for everyone. They only show up like this for people who are very special. I had expected those 2 days and 8 hours at the funeral home to be pure hell. Many of you have had to stand on a reception line for your loved ones at a funeral home, and you know it isn't easy. It's very difficult. Instead, the hours flew by as we heard family after family tell how Shirley impacted their children and their families as a whole. It was not unusual to have a whole family standing in front of us in tears. In many cases, the children had long left Hawes, and this continued for 2 days. And the staff here was wonderful to us. You fed our families during the days of the funeral home. The kind words and stories you shared helped fill lots of the blanks in those stories that Shirley had told me across the dinner table all those years. Some of you shared your thoughts with a record, the newspaper that is, which resulted in an unbelievable tribute article to her. Paul's words at the memorial service were wonderful, and I know they reflected the collective thoughts many of you had shared with him. And the cards, calls, emails, and visits I received afterwards from the staff were truly appreciated. And the letters from the children, so innocent, yet so heartfelt. I also hear many of you are knitting more these days, although it's a little hot for the scarves. But Deb came over to my house one Sunday and she had her scarf on. And so what was black and white was now Technicolor. That which was two-dimension is now fully 3D. Of course, I would have preferred living out the end of my days with Shirley by my side. But maybe in the case of such a strong woman, I should say with me by her side. But that was not to be. Had that been the case, however, we would never have known what happened in this building. In this community of Ridgewood, New Jersey, and with this staff. We would never have known the profound impact she had on so many lives. And I can tell you with all certainty, you all had a profound impact on her and made her the person she was. When Paul called me to tell me about this garden and the intent to dedicate it to Shirley, I must say I was stunned. When I told Bill Keith about it, he said it again. Ken, they don't do this for everyone. But this time I got it. And I might just briefly divert a bit to talk about Shirley's parents, Helen and John Kopchik, who are here today, with their twin brother, Jack. This has not been easy for them, as they've been here before. Shirley's sister and their daughter, Audrey, was lost in a tragic accident in 1980. Audrey was an elementary school teacher long before Shirley even thought of it. And there is a garden dedicated in her memory at the Tashawa School in Trumbull, Connecticut. And so, from our family, I want to thank you, the staff, the administration, and the entire Ridgewood community for honoring her in this way and in all the ways you have. Thank you.
Today, together, in memory and in friendship, we were able to pay honor and tribute to a very special person, Mrs. Kolkebeck. We will all pass this garden frequently with warm thoughts and happy memories, remembering what was an outstanding career of a wonderful person. Much of this afternoon's program was arranged by Mrs. Schneider and Mrs. Bodart, who have also arranged for a wonderful reception with cookies and punch, which will take place just inside the hallways. Shirley, we will always miss you. I want to thank everyone for coming here today, and have a wonderful, wonderful day. Thank you. Each of the children painted a very special rock in memory of Mrs. Kolkebeck, and they're going to place them in this wonderful pot right here in the center underneath the tree.